Welcome to the Connected Spirit Podcast, a space where the mystical and the human experience merge, where we explore what it really means to walk a spirit-led path. I'm Courtney Dawson, an ethical medium and mentor, and for as long as I can remember, I have felt the presence of the spirit world. But my journey hasn't been simple. It's been one of self-discovery, healing from religious and emotional trauma, navigating fear, judgment, and the loneliness that comes with embracing something the world doesn't always understand. This podcast is here to take what was once considered woo and bring it into the real lived experience of being human. Because mediumship isn't just something we do, it's who we are. Here we dive into the conversations no one else is having, breaking down misconceptions, exploring the unseen, and normalizing the journey of deep connection. We'll talk about the beauty and the struggle of being a medium. We'll laugh, we'll reflect, we'll go deep. And most importantly, we'll remember who we are, why we're here, and how spirit moves through us all. So if you've ever felt something more, if you've ever questioned the unseen, or if you're simply ready to embrace the fullness of your spiritual path, you're in the right place. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Connected Spirit Podcast. Today, we have a very good friend of the show back for another appearance. And this is a conversation I am gripping the handles on my seat to have, because what is going to be shared today is not been talked about. And also, I was just recently on his show and he alluded to some things that he was really excited to share with us. And that's all I can say. So I want to welcome back to the show a very good friend of the show, Phantom Phil. He actually started Unexplained Inc., which is an incredible spiritual podcast back in March of 2020. And the show started out as the Friday Night Fright and evolved to where the unknown connects with the empowered. At that point in time, Phil saw that the subjects of the paranormal, the metaphysical, unexplained, conspiracy, and spirituality all weave together like a web. And digging into the truth of the unknown needed to be aided by aspects of spiritual healing and the ascension of consciousness. Phil is certified in the modalities of core shamanism. Phil is also a Usui Reiki master and practices spiritual-based hypnotherapy. He practices out of Lavender Lane Wellness Center in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. He's a fellow Canadian, which allows bookings of online appointments. So you can check him out there, and going to have all of that information in the show notes for you. In many ways, Phil's own journey is just beginning, and you can check out his show, his social media links, and much more on unexplainedinc.com. Phil, so good to have you back.
Well, it's great to be back, Courtney. It's been a minute or two, and there's plenty to discuss.
I know. So when I was on your show, I talked about what was going on in my world, really starting November 2023 into 2024. And you had shared that you've had your own story. So let's get into it. Talk to me about what was happening in your world at that
Sure.
time for you.
I have to give a little bit of background and pretext
Yeah.
before I get to the event itself, just so it makes sense for
Yeah.
everyone. At some point in 2022, I discovered the Bledsoe Said So podcast, and I learned about the story about the Bledsoe family out of North Carolina and their interactions with what they believe are likely extraterrestrial beings, and then countless orb sightings, which the father has been able to call in and now is doing it for large groups of people. Okay. That's the short version. As soon as I heard them as the two hosts of the show on a podcast, I started to subscribe and listen. And I have a lot of shows on my palette. So for me to do that, that means that they're doing something special. And I'm glad I jumped on board and I consumed whatever I could. So fast forward to late 2022, I got to know some interesting people on the show, and they started to guide me through some what I'll call interdimensional meditations. And I came to some very interesting discoveries with those. And we'll probably get into those another time because they don't have time today.
Yeah.
And about a week later, from doing these meditations or so, in December of 2022, I'm driving home from the gym. It's a cloudy, light rain, wet night in like the middle of December. And all of a sudden, I see this light just shoot across the sky, like almost in like a slingshot motion. And I'm like, okay, it's cloudy, highly unlikely that was a meteor. And then I remember too, because this all happened so fast between the sighting and when I got home, I stopped my car and I just kind of said, what the hell was that? And I'm like, well, I do live near a regional airport, so maybe that was something. I go to walk into my building, I see a plane in the sky. So I'm like, okay, what I saw in the car, that was no plane. And I can't help but feel it was connected to the interdimensional meditation. So I'm
Mm.
like, I don't know if I saw a UFO or something, but I saw something that I can't explain. And I'll leave it at that. So, spring of 2023, Chris Bledsoe releases his book, UFO of God. And I read it, and it has a very profound impact on me. And then a couple of strange things start to happen while I am reading the book. The first being is when I started the book, which was on the May long weekend of 2023, I did a upper world shamanic journey later that evening. And what I believe was him came to visit me in the upper world to tell me
Okay.
what a profound effect the book was going to have on me. Now, I've seen plenty of people from the 3D in these shamanic realms. And it's not everybody that I know. It's like whoever shows up at times shows up. And
Mm.
he showed up, and I just went, okay, this is quite significant. This is no accident. And then fast forward a couple of weeks later, I'm reading through the book. Now, I want to give a shout out to a former episode of my show from mid May of 2024. What I'm about to describe, I talk about in great detail because I don't have time to do it here, but it's
Yeah.
on that episode, and I can send you that after if you want
Okay.
the direct link. But when I'm reading the book, I find out Chris has a relationship with a what I'll call an owl totem. Owls show up in his life at very specific times, and at times it has to do with events surrounding grief and sadness. And it's very potent. And later on in the book, there's a chapter where his longtime dog passes away. And it's very sad. After I finish that chapter, I start seeing owls in just about every place you can think of on my social media, on the backs of cars, on packaging at my workplace. It gets a little ridiculous, and there's more detail on that in the episode that I just cited. And I started to connect the dots because I swear this went on for 4 or 5 weeks, if not longer. That, and I never saw a physical owl at that point in time either. It was all symbols of the totem. And whenever it would come up, I would get this feeling inside. And that's when you know you're connecting with an animal spirit and not just a random animal. It's hard to explain, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Totally.
And something would come up about his story or the Bledsoes, or would be when I was listening to a current episode later in the week, the owl would show up. And that led to them in July of 2023 having an author on their show who wrote a book, I kid you not, on the correlation between UFO sightings, abductions, and owls. And at this point, I'm like just shaking my head in disbelief. I'm like, seriously, what is going on right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what did I do? I went and bought this author's two books, and I eventually read them throughout the rest of the year, and it was very fascinating. And of course, Chris Bledsoe was interviewed in there from quite a few years ago. So this all leads me into November of 2023. So a lot of this story and this family story is that if you want to connect with these orbs, you can simply go outside and do it yourself. Okay. If you're in the right state of mind, the right frequency. I'll also point out that summer, I don't think it aired here in Canada, but in the US and the UK, Chris Bledsoe appeared on the History Channel. And I think it was the Beyond Skinwalker Ranch series.
Yeah.
And they had a team. This was filmed way prior, but it aired in summer of 23. They had a team hook him up with like this EEG type of device, this type of headgear, and they found he could put himself into a theta state, like a meditative state, and then
Mhm.
all the orbs would appear. And since then, at various public sightings and posts on the Instagram, it's gotten crazy. And more people are switching on to this. And of course, in juxtaposition, it's creating more and more opposition for
Yeah.
those who think it's either all lies or it's evil or what have you. It's like you have the believers and you have the non believers. And in November of 2023, I officially became a believer, 100%. I decided to do a little experiment. I was driving in northern Ontario on the main highway that takes you further north, and if you go far enough north, it turns into the Trans Canada Highway,
Mhm.
and it'll take you coast to coast. I wasn't quite up that far, but maybe about halfway. Either way, the highway I was on was quite desolate, and I wasn't near any major metropolitan areas. I wasn't near any airports. And once again, like in 2022, it was clouded over, wasn't a clear night, and it was light rain. And this was like probably the second last week in November. I was listening to the show on the way up to my destination. And of course, the topic came up again. So I got an idea. I'm going at a very consistent speed. I know where I'm going. What if while I'm driving, I obviously can't meditate, but what if I ground? What if I ground and try and open up my heart space? Maybe I can call this thing in. So I did it for a little while, and my internal system, I could just feel this tension building up and up and up. And then all of a sudden, light shoots across the sky. And I was like, okay, I wonder if that was a fluke. So I kept into that state and I tried it again. And then I got a couple of flickers. Now, seeing a flicker in the night sky, you think, like, what's the big deal here? But I just
Yeah.
remind you, this is a cloudy night in the middle of November, literally in the middle of nowhere.
We're
So,
in Northern Ontario, there's
yeah,
nothing.
yeah,
Yeah.
very little. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, I
And
gotta pause you for a
yeah,
second here
yeah.
because holy smokes, I'm listening here and I'm going, holy smokes. So let's talk about these orbs. Are these like UAPs? Do we know, does Chris Bledsoe, which I've been making notes because I'm going to check this guy out and check out the book UFO of God because
Yep.
you've got me in here. What is Chris Bledsoe and others who are doing these contacts? What are they saying these orbs are? Part one. And then number two, what is the intention of actually reaching out and connecting with them? Because, like,
Mm,
as a medium, I know
yeah.
that there's different soul beings. So we've got people who've passed over, we have interdimensional beings, and there's usually, well, there really is often an intention behind that communication. So, what is that for connecting with these orbs?
Mm, great questions. Kind of loaded questions. So I'll do the best I
Hmm.
can.
Yeah.
So the first question, I'm only going to answer it partially now because it's going to also tie into my November 2024 experience, which we'll
Okay.
get into as well, because I was shown my own version as to what they are. Okay.
Okay.
So, what I'll say right now in this part of our chat is that there's a very popular belief that Chris believes that they are angelic beings, as far as I understand and as far as I have that right. Um, and again, as far as I can remember, it's they mostly refer to it as the phenomenon. They don't actually call it extraterrestrial. However, in January 2007, he had what he believes was an extraterrestrial experience with him, his one son, and a group of coworkers, and he experienced missing time, and that's a whole other thing that goes deeper into the book. And he thinks so. Also about him too, he has had multiple near-death experiences. at different stages of his life. And like, he really shouldn't even be here right now. It's kind of miraculous that he's
Okay.
here to deliver this message to us. And basically, I think it's affected his energy field. And not only on top of that, but on top of all of those traumas he faced a lot of other personal and professional trauma from being in a town in the Bible Belt of North Carolina and getting persecuted for it and ousted from his church and becoming a bit of a pariah, if you will. And one common theme that people who can call these in real easily are that they have faced or are getting over serious trauma in their life. And they're basically sending out a prayer to the universe, and then these things will
Mm.
show up. Now, in my case, I wasn't in a state where I was recovering from trauma or anything major. However, I opened up the heart space and just sent out the intention of unconditional love to call them in. And that's another thing on his son's podcast that they've talked about as well, is that that will call them in as well. Okay. And I could feel like almost this giddy level of joy building up, building up, building up. And then I saw it. And then I saw like the two other flickers. And I'm not kidding. It's like I felt like a kid at Christmas.
Hmm.
A little bit, maybe about 20 minutes after this happened on the highway, I pulled into a gas station, filled up, and I sent a voice note to a friend, and like my voice was like shaking, you know?
Of
And then
course,
when
yeah.
I got further back down to the Toronto area, I hopped on a phone call with someone, and she's like, "Oh, your energy is buzzing right now." And I'm like, "Well, I've got stories for you." um,
Definitely.
so that was a game changer. And then we started to go in the winter here in Canada. And I said, next spring or summer, I'm going to try this again when the weather gets good. And July 1st, which is Canada Day for us, 2024, I ended up in Bruce County, Ontario, further north, a fairly, even though it gets a lot of tourist action in the summer, it's a fairly remote area. And then I went on a shamanic journey, and my guide in the upper world told me, pay attention tonight, you're going to see something. And I ended up on the shores of Lake Huron, because if you go there at the right day, the right time of the year, you could see some of the best sunsets like in the province, I think, or at least my part of the province. So I was able to do that. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to ground and meditate, and I'm going to call something in. And I appeared to do so, and it was way, way up high, clear night. And I took my phone out, excuse me, and started to film it. And I'm thinking, this just might be a star. This might be not a big deal.
Hmm.
But then as I'm looking through the lens, I'm like, this is moving in a very weird way. Like, this is very unusual, right? And then, so I got, I don't know, like a good minute, minute and a half of it. And then I'm like, if that was it, that's cool. I'm going to have to check this out. So I got home late, had to work. So the following evening, I import the video onto my video editing software and I blow it up like 200% or whatever.
Hmm.
And I look at this and I'm like, I think that's an orb. And so what do? I go on to like Chris Bledsoe's Instagram, which I follow. And now he has like high grade, like military level equipment and has some unbelievable shots of these things. But he had this one post, and I put my video side by side with it. And I'm like, that's it. I know that's it. And there's a couple of other experiencers who I follow on Instagram that I chat with once in a while, and I send it to them, and they're like, "Oh, great catch!" So, and this is on my Instagram page. It's pinned.
Okay.
You can see it, and not a single person has messaged or commented on it and said, "Oh, that's just a satellite. That's just the North Star." Like, nobody has said,
I'm gonna pull
"Yeah,
it up right now for the
yeah."
show. So I'm just looking here.
Well, while you're
Because
doing that,
yeah, keep going here.
while you're doing that, I just want to say, um, the August long weekend, because it's funny because I think Ontario and BC have the same long weekend throughout the summer, but like the rest of the country doesn't. It's one of those weird deals.
Yeah.
But anyway, on that weekend, I went out to a lake in an area closer to me in South Central Ontario, and I was able to do it again right after sundown. So I got a
Okay.
video of that as well, and I've had a couple of other smaller. Yeah, there we go.
So
Uh,
as you're talking, I'm just pulling this up here. Is it the first video here?
no, you'll have to go to Reels,
Oh, here we go.
and it should be pinned on it. Yeah, it's the very first one right here.
Okay, so those of you that are watching the video, you can see the orb here. Very clear, and look at the unique movement of it.
Yeah, yeah. We
And the
don't need.
speed, and the speed.
Yeah, yeah. And at this point in time, I just want to point out too, because this was Canada Day, there was a fireworks show earlier, but it
Hmm.
had long since ended because, yeah, it says in my post there, this is very close to 10 p.m. And the beach was pretty much empty, and I didn't see anything else in my sight line that was moving like this. And if we let it play, it's going to we're going to get to the shot of it in my editing software where it's blown way up. So
Okay.
it was interesting because I caught it in the moment, but the skeptical part of my mind came in, and I was like, no, that's not it, that's not it. And then when I saw it in the software, I was like, oh, this is a very different story. But like, doesn't that movement look unusual to you? And like, I'm moving my
It
phone
does.
just to stay with it. Like, it's not stationary.
No, it does. And the movements remind me very, very similar of the UAPs that have been caught on camera in real time on that television show Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah,
So
here it
now
is.
we're at the editing software program
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
See, look at the movement of it. Look at the
And the multicolor
characteristics.
flashing. Yeah.
Yeah, that is not a bug or any kind of debris.
And
That's incredible.
that shot you're seeing too, the close up, it's way, way, way up in the sky.
That
Like
is
that's,
incredible, Phil.
yeah, yeah. And
S-
even though if you
Wow.
check my Instagram, there's another video there from last August, but it's not pinned. Like I pinned that because I'm
Okay.
like, that's the first one, it's the best. And my higher guidance team told me it was coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you had that experience and when you're tuning into that, there must have been, I shouldn't say there must have been, but when you're catching this on camera, you being sensitive, you being somebody who is in tune to energies, was there any kind of like physical, energetic reaction that you were having while you're capturing this? Or are you just kind of like stunned, like, what am I actually catching here? Like, holy shit.
Well, I'm partially stunned and I'm partially having that same gleeful, joyful feeling I had in November
Yeah.
2023. But like this was different though, because after the November experience, I was like, when the weather warms up again, I gotta find time to go out, ground, open the heart center, and call in an orb and see it. And as the weather warms up here again this time of year, I'm going to go out and try and do the same things. And Courtney, there's a lot I could get into here, but we'll probably save it for later on. But
Yeah.
I feel between what we've just discussed and witnessed and the relation of the owl totem and all this and how it's all flown into my life over the last 2 to 3 years, I think I'm playing somewhat of a part in terms of bringing this to people or leading um, what we'll call skywatching circles or ceremonies for people to help them call this in. That's all I know for now, but I've received a lot of breadcrumbs pushing me in this direction to the point where it's undeniable. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
That is so, so interesting. That's all I can say because I don't even know if there's a better word for it. It's mind-blowing, but yet you're actually capturing it. And I'm very much aware of orbs. I believe in orbs. I do readings, I catch them. Very similar movements to what you captured on camera.
Do you
But
remember?
different though.
Yeah, do you remember the very first time you appeared on Unexplained? I sent you this video blown up in my editing software. You had a different setup in your office at the time, but an orb whizzed right by your head. Remember? Like I still have that video on my computer. So I mean, we've seen it together.
Absolutely. I mean, I catch them weekly. I'm
Mm,
just used to it. Ever actually since I was young, I've always seen orbs. I didn't really have a language at the time to say that's what it was. I just knew there was something unexplained about it. But with the orbs that you are connecting with, the understanding from what Chris Bledsoe is talking about is that these are some sort of angelic beings. So, with your work moving forward, helping people connect with these beings, what is the purpose for them in doing that? Just so we're kind of clear, because
mhm.
there are, I always say use discernment. I never want people calling in something they don't know anything
Yeah,
about and don't know why they're calling them about. So, could you just maybe clarify that for the listeners here?
I'll do the best that I can
Yeah.
because it's not fully my place to clarify, but I'll relay
Yeah.
what I've heard publicly from the family. And the full story, catch up on the Bledsoe Said So podcast and read the book,
Yeah.
or do your own research into it. But the short version of that is that they strongly believe we are going through a collective consciousness shift or rising right now, which I think many of us believe.
Yeah.
And they keep referring to the coming of a great awakening for humanity.
Mm.
And allegedly, I won't get into this too deeply because it's not my story to tell and I'm just relaying, but something major is supposed to happen at the site of the Great Sphinx in Egypt, Easter of 2026. And I don't know what that's about or what it entails. Chris Bledsoe received that messaging from an entity that's related to, but yet separate from all of this, it seems. And like I said, that's for you to check out in his story. Um, but I think the purpose of this might be some type of way to raise the global consciousness and to give us hope in these troubled times of conflict. It's still really a great mystery, but I mean, that's the best guess I could give based on the information I've heard publicly through this family and what they do. And I just want to sneak this in real quick. Um, I don't know when this show is posting, but before the end of May, I am having an experiencer on the show from Southern California who has taken the cross country trip and met the Bledsoes and is having rapid fire experiences with this. So when that episode comes out, we might be able to get a little bit more answers and insights into this more than what I can give now. So you can look forward to that.
Okay. I want to ask you something because as I'm listening to what you shared and what the Bledsoes are talking about, it reminds me, or let me say, it has similarities of what Dr. Stephen Greyer has talked about.
Yes. So,
And yeah, I mean, that's a whole other story, but I remember a friend of mine took one of his courses off, I think it was Gaia or the Shift Network,
yeah, yeah.
and she took it. And I said, okay, so why do you want to contact these aliens? What's the point? Not that, is it just to validate that they're there? Or are you wanting to work with them? Like what's the purpose, right? I mean, and I'm not there from a place of judgment. I'm just, why would you want to talk to some aliens? Just like people
Yeah,
go,
exactly.
Courtney, why do you want to talk to dead people? I'm like, well,
Yeah.
hold on. They're not dead. They don't have bodies, but this is why. So she said, um, very little, just about that it was about allowing those other interdimensional beings to come connect with us and to be able to have it was basically about communion, and
Mhm.
the intention was what activated some kind of energetic force, if you will, that
Yep,
guided them in, very similar to what you're
yep,
talking about with the
yep.
orbs. And she said, so I live in BC, and we have a beach, and it's White Rock Beach. And she was on the beach and she did this intention and she saw something go across the sky. Wasn't dark, it was still light. And it was real for her. And it was so interesting to me. This was about 7 years ago. And I was like, why would you want to talk to some aliens? And then it was around that time that I started having interactions with interdimensional beings like avatars and
Mm,
some not so nice ones like
yeah.
draconian things,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
salamanders, aliens, not the grays, but different kinds of aliens. So I was like, what is it? So I'm curious, like, What are the parallels? Why is the world so interested now in connecting with these aliens, like intentionally?
So this is very interesting you bring this up. So I'm going to stick with Dr. Greer for just a minute.
Yeah,
My own observations and analysis of him is I have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and I have
yeah.
my reasons for that. However, I'll just say this: some synchronicities have popped up in the last few months that led me to believe that I might be blending in some of his CE5 work with what I'm going to be doing. And I also might be blending in some stuff from the Monroe Institute. And you'll
Okay.
love this, Courtney. I'm not kidding. Like, there's been a small window of time before we did our recordings, and one of the guests I had on the show back in January of this year, who we've kind of struck up like a kinship with, he just arrived at the Monroe Institute. And I wrote on his wall and I said, we got to talk about this when, like later in the year. And he says, oh, yeah. He's like, I'm coming on your show whenever you'll have me. So, I mean, I'm going to get more insight there too. Anyway, back to Dr. Greer. Some people really have a problem with his ego and how he presents himself. Some people have a very big problem with what I don't know if this is the case anymore, but he used to charge an arm and a leg for, his lasers and his weekend retreats and all that. And some people see that he's allegedly funded by one of the Rockefellers, and that is a
Mm,
major red flag for them. Um, I've never come across anything that has made me go ick with the guy, but I'm a little skeptical and suspicious. But since like the advent of YouTube and the rise of all this stuff, a lot of his materials can be accessed for free. And I do know at least Ryan Bledsoe publicly on his podcast has declared issue with the way Dr. Greer does his business and conducts himself. So and you have to remember, you can read about this more in the UFO of God book, as we hit 333 right on,
hmm.
that the U.S. government and the CIA and the Pentagon took great interest in the Bledsoe family, so they know something about this too. And Ryan, at one point in time, I believe, said that it took him years to even want to start the podcast, due to various reasons. And it's just,
Hmm.
I don't know. I think we're just at a collective shift where this stuff, whether it's the Bledsoes or Greer or the Monroe Institute or other, and I just joined a CE5 group about 2 hours away from me too on Facebook's through another guest. So we'll see where that goes too. But I just feel like for whatever reason, there's been a collective shift where the interest in this is at an all-time high. And then, late 2024, we get all this 2023 and 2024, we get all this disclosure nuggets and then drones over New Jersey. So like it's going into the mainstream instead of the fringe. So like something's brewing. That's all I can say.
Absolutely. It's the powers that be, seen and unseen, are deciding, okay, they're ready for this, perhaps. Because I mean, this isn't anything new per se. It's just that certain disclosed information they're now starting to kind of give us a little bit of crumblets or little breadcrumbs of, right? Where is
Yeah,
this taking your journey now? Because we know you work, you have your podcast, you're in Reiki Master, Core
yeah.
Shamanism.
I'm a dad
Where's
too.
yeah, like where
Yeah.
and your dad too. Where's your journey going? This because these are some massive shifts, Phil.
Okay. I'm gonna get to that in just a second, but I
Yeah.
want to point out too that oh, okay, I don't remember where I was going with that, but anyway, where this all's gonna lead to is you were asking me earlier about where the orbs came from and all this.
Yeah.
Well, I received an interesting download in November 2024 about it. And actually, just before I get there, I just remembered my last thought is I want to point out that I never consciously seeked any of this out. It seeked me. Like their story happened in the beginning of 2007, and there were documentaries that aired on the Discovery Channel and were in UFO communities and all that. And then I didn't find out about it until 2022, and I'm like kind of in tune with this stuff, right? So like it's all organically flowed into my life. So like
Yep.
that's got to mean something right there, and that's got to mean something big for my journey. And to answer your question in the short term. I'm still trying to unpack and figure all that out. But all I can say is that I think the more I learn about this and the more I connect with people that are in tune with this, I think I'm going to play a role in helping people along with it. And it's going to tie in with the podcast. And I think Spirit hasn't quite shown me the full reason yet. And that's okay.
They will. They will.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, your work in shamanism, is that
Yes.
deepening? Is that intensifying?
Yeah. Now I won't get into this right now fully, but I had a reading this past week, and it touched on a theme that's been beating me over the head, literally, for the last little while. Is get out of here and into the heart, out of the head and into the
Mm,
heart. So when I'm in my head, I have trouble connecting once in a while, but when I'm not, the connection is very strong. And a place where that connection is very strong is at my teacher's home, okay, where she does her classes and stuff. So I finished everything she offered, and I'm at a point where if she needs an extra body, I'll go over and it's free of charge, and I get to hang out, meet people over an afternoon. It's a cool deal. And I retook shamanic psychopomp in November of 2024. First time I retook the class in 3 years. I had done a little bit of psychopomp work, which had some pretty amazing and fascinating results. And a quick explanation for that is it's basically you're taking souls that are stuck here on the earth plane, and with their consent, you're crossing them over to the other side, to the light. Okay. And it could be very intense work, it could be very rewarding work. And I retook it last November, and we went through an exercise. Now, the exercise, I believe, I'm just doing this off the top of my head, is called you take a shamanic journey to I can't remember if it's the valley or the land of, yeah, I think it's called the Valley of All Souls. Or no, it's the Destination of All Souls. I think that's what it's called. And basically, you're taking a shamanic journey to a realm where people go when they pass, and you're being shown what it looks like. Okay.
okay.
That happened in 2021. I got my own version of it. It was pretty cool. And what I saw, it looked like it was like just in the middle of outer space, and there was this giant nebula or like a star. And I just saw these like stick figures floating towards it, and they would cross over, and then I wouldn't see them anymore. Well, fast forward 3 years and a lot of craziness later, um, I would have a guide that would take me into the nebula
Okay.
and then receive a crash course of information to take back with me. So I have to paraphrase a couple of things before I get into this deeper. Is first of all, I am no expert on anything. I do not have all the answers. I do not have a messiah or a guru complex. Um, but what I witnessed and what I saw in this journey resonates highly with me in truth. And at the end of the day, truth to us is what we perceive, right?
Yep.
Like outside of some universal truths. Now, another interesting thing I'd like to bring up before I continue on this, and I did this fully intentionally, is that when you were on my show, I was talking about opposing viewpoints and people getting triggered by them, and how I keep up with some content I strongly disagree with, but I want to know the perspective. So here's spirit rolling in the synchronicity again. I have a podcast. I'm not going to name the show, but I mean, some of you can figure it out. The episode was called The NDE Conspiracy. So I've listened to a lot of content that have kind of gone after people's perceptions of NDEs, near death experiences, and what they think they are and what they aren't. Some of it gets pretty wild. Um, I've talked about it on the show plenty of times. You and I have gotten into it a little bit. One common thread we do find is that overwhelmingly these experiences are positive and leads people to more fulfilling lives. But there are the odd ones where people have a truly terrifying experience, and like it scares them straight in the 3D. And it's really fascinating. It's a much smaller percentage, but it's still out there and still needs to be talked about. So, this episode, of course, was through the lens of the Christian perspective in scripture. So, I knew what I was getting or what I was going to get. And I have to admit, like, three-quarters of the interview was quite fascinating, and I was on board with it. But then it started to go into the usual places, which I think you and I know what we're talking about here. And before I list them, we need to refrain from using the word all, or be very careful about how we use it, right? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm going to paraphrase the thesis of where this episode went. And it's basically all mediums are only contacting dark entities. Anything that goes against scripture is demonic, and all stories of reincarnation, spirit guides, and loved ones you tune with, they're all deceiving you. They're all false. Because
Familiar
it,
spirits. Yeah.
yes, yeah, that term got brought up a lot actually. Yeah, yeah. So before I go any further, do you have anything to say about that? Because I'd love to hear your perspective, because I know you've got one.
Oh, Phil, I know. I go on a rant, so I'll try not to today. I'll behave
Yeah, yeah,
myself.
yeah,
So, I actually have a lot of religious trauma because of growing up in a Christian home and parents having some really, really strong beliefs around um, the spiritual realms, angels, demons, and God. That was it. And then there's God the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, right? There's all that kind of stuff. I never could understand how some omnipresent being would miraculously have a virgin impregnated. Okay. And then that baby was born, and then that baby was born for the purposes of dying on the cross for my sins. My ass that hadn't even been on the earth yet. My ass that hadn't even sinned, so called. Okay. It never made sense to me. But then we had all of this, I'm going to call it doctrination. It's really what it is, was there's bodies, people here, we have bodies, we die, we stay in the grave until the rapture, when God blows his trumpet and calls us back to heaven, or so-called home. And I thought, well, that sounds weird. But anyways, it didn't resonate with me because from a young age, I was seeing spirits.
yeah.
And bless my mom, she did actually ask some people in the church, hey, like Courtney's seeing this stuff. What do I do? They had little to no answers. They just said, oh, she's, seeing into the spirit realms. We'll pray for her. Well, prayer didn't help my ass, gave me nothing but anxiety. And I do understand where, if we look at it from a scriptural point of view, there was King Saul, and he had a very close confidant and friend called Samuel. Samuel was a prophet, would hear from God and give him information from God to make decisions over the kingdom. Well, Samuel dies, and King Saul still wants to tap into his wisdom and guidance from Samuel. So he hires some kind of medium, witch, whatever, to summon the soul of Samuel.
Mm.
And so King Saul asks him for some info, follows it, doesn't turn out well. And from that point, he made it law, which ended up in scripture.
Oh yeah, yeah, of
No more
course.
meeting.
Yeah.
So to me, I was like, so one bad apple ruins it for the whole lot? That doesn't make sense. And then if we want to get to it, you can't tell me Jesus wasn't a medium. He was talking to God, a non-physical being. He was talking to the angelic realm. If we look at scripture, this, I'm not my opinion, but if we look at scripture, they talk about demons, demonic entities,
Yeah.
and they talk about angelic. Those are all non-physical, but he was able to see and to communicate and interact. What is that? That is mediumship. He was an incredible healer who would channel divine universal life force energy to healing, to offer healing to, well, anybody. So for me, I think it's a crock of shit. Gets me all fired up
Yeah, yeah, I
because,
could tell.
yeah, because it's like you're telling us not to do this, but the dude who you so-called follow he was doing the exact same things. And in the Bible, it says, um, we are made in the likeness of God, and Jesus was apparently an expression of God. And the works that I do, you will do greater. So if he was doing all that stuff, why can't we?
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
stop there because I get fired up.
No, no, I could tell. That's cool. And
Yeah.
there's a specific reason I am bringing this up. I am not doing this out of the context of shame. I am doing it for
Yeah.
um, contextual perspectives, if you will, and you'll see where I'm going with all this. So, just one thing to bring up to that is that when you recorded with me very recently, you told me about some very unwelcome entities that came into your space. And I think you are more than intelligent enough to tell the difference between benevolent and malevolent. And nobody's going to tell you all, and you're going to be like, yeah, okay, I believe you. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
you used your discernment pretty well there. And the Bledsoes, even to this day, they still are getting flack about all those orbs. They're demons. You got to stay away from them based on like nothing really. And I don't remember, it was either the show Instagram page or Ryan's personal page. I left a comment about something and somebody replied to my comment with that phrase. Somebody I didn't even know or follow. And I'm just like, get out of here. Like what are you doing? Um, so Courtney's made it very clear where she stands. Where I stand,
Mhm.
I don't believe in the concept of eternal damnation for anyone,
No.
even like the sickest of the sick. Um, I am a big proprietor of reincarnation. I'm always interested to listen to both sides of the argument on that one, but with my experiences, it's hard not to go into
Yeah.
that and soul growth and all that. And I've never really bought into God and the devil being these masculine archetypes of one's the old man in the sky and one's like the half man, half goat in fire. You know what I mean? Like, I think they're both energies that our human minds couldn't even explain. And another thing in that podcast was that, like a lot of it was, oh, these spirits you're contacting are just Satan deceiving you. And then I just go, well, does Satan, as you know it, really exist? Like, you know what I mean? Like, not to say there isn't dark energies out there, but anyway, I bring that all up because I want to share about this experience of me entering the nebula in the psychopomp journey. So, not only have the owl totems showed up for me in the
Mhm.
physical, I now have a guide in the non-physical as well. And I think his name is Oliver, if I remember correctly. Oliver guided me into the nebula in November of 2024. And what I saw there, like I could see like outlines and silhouettes flying around, floating around, like disembodied energies. And it was like all white, like it was so bright. Like I almost like, even though I'm in the non-physical, I feel like I have to cover my eyes.
Mhm.
And then Oliver the Owl, the teacher, of course, because owl, knowledge teacher, it all goes hand in hand, starts laying all of these, what I consider anyway, info truth bombs onto me. To the point where I was like, I don't want to get out of this journey because I feel like I'm learning possibly the true secrets of our existence here. Like it was insane. So I'll get into some of that now. Um, that yes, we are all energetic bodies having a human experience. That's pretty obvious. But when that energy, when the body dies and that energy crosses over into the destiny of souls, if I get the
Mhm.
name right, sorry if I don't, but you know what I mean. Um, Almost right away, they get a life review when they're over there, when they cross over. And based on that life review, um, and I don't know if anybody's doing it with them, like it's just one on one, I think. If they've been a really shitty, low vibrational person, I think, like I was shown, they have to come back. Soul's got to come back and do it all over again, see if you learn any lessons. Apparently, I don't remember the exact number, but apparently I've had a lot of incarnations. So and I'm getting near the end of it, I think. That's what I've been told anyway. So, and like I said, even like the worst people ever, they're not. being banished to some land of eternal damnation. It's like, no, you're going to come back and you're going to try this all again. And the people who lived a great life, they can only come back if they choose to. Like they have the option
Mhm.
to stay over there or to come back. And some will choose to come back because they want to experience this like one more time, or they feel they can be a guide or a teacher to others down here who have lost their way, right? And then once I got out of the nebula, I got all this information about the Bible and about how it's a very useful book. And there are a lot of truths in it, but that it's been distorted and perverted by man. And that
I believe that.
it's like lost its original meaning and all this. And then I started to see the earth. And yeah, it was a ball, by the way. Sorry to disappoint the flat earth crew out there. This is just what I saw. you know? Um, I saw that half of it was covered in white light and half of it was enveloped in like brimstone looking darkness. And that the brimstone darkness was really pressing against the light. Like there was a lot of friction. And we talked about this on my show too. But then I showed over time the light would envelop the whole earth, meaning that there will be a shift one day, I think. And it's not like we're going to be rid of all problems and all evil, but I think the parasitic class that is really trying to control and run the show, it's like they're going to get run out of town. Okay. And then another popular term, and I'm not completely against this term, but it might be starting to get redundant, is spiritual warfare. Now, another download I got in this journey was the battle isn't about spirituality, it's about frequency. And what I was shown was the higher you could bring your frequency, the closer you automatically get to your home, to the destiny of souls, and to the true essence of your being. And the lower the frequency, the more heavy and dense you are, and the more kind of trapped in the 3D you will be, and you won't have these like mystical, non physical experiences. Okay. So that brings up a whole other interesting point in regards to that is that what are some of the worst qualities about rich people? Okay, well, they hoard and guard their money. They have a lot of possessions. Like here, my mug is a possession. Possessions take up a lot of energy and space, and they're heavy, they're dense.
Mhm.
And I, like in my residence, I have to do a major declutter over this spring and summer because the energy's getting dense and there's a lot of stuff I don't need anymore. Whereas if you've spent time with people who are chronically angry and upset, their energy's heavy, even in the way they walk. You
Yep.
feel it. But if someone is living their peace and living their truth, their energy is lighter, their words are lighter. And I think that's a sign of being closer to the light and where you're supposed to be. And you're probably familiar with was it David Hawkins, the graph of consciousness or whatever it is? I
Yep.
probably have the name wrong, but yeah, that thing is a real measuring stick on how we should try and live. And of course, what's at the bottom of that hierarchy of consciousness? Shame and guilt.
Oh, yeah.
Are shame and guilt heavy? Yeah, I would say they are.
They're so intense, and we look at our world right now, and we see so
yeah,
many people struggling with mental health issues,
yeah,
depression, anxiety, etc. I mean, big pharma is making bank off these souls that are stuck
yeah.
in those really dense, heavy emotions.
And we talked about how a lot of the rise in the homelessness and the drug
Yeah.
issues are possibly bringing in entities, negative
Yep.
entities. And what I was shown, I got two more points before I finish up here. And this is like literally all I can remember from this journey, which was pretty intense. Okay. And this isn't like a
Yeah.
20-minute span in Earth time. Like, was that there are no angels and okay, I should be careful of how I phrase this. Is like yeah, there's good spirits, negative spirits, angels, demons, whatever you want to call them, good ETs, bad ETs, but they said they're all the same thing, but they're on different frequencies, right?
Okay, you've got me
So,
speechless for a moment. I'm like, what? That doesn't happen very often. So what does that mean?
well,
What does
I
that
was
mean?
I was just going to add is that I think the message was all of it is from the creator.
Yeah.
Like everything, the light and the dark and everything in between ultimately serves the light. And I've had guests on the show who have said this too. And it's like trying to figure out, well, is that spirit an angel? Is it a demon? Is it this? Is it that?
Hmm.
Well, yeah, it's all of those things, but it comes from one source. So why are we debating about it? Why are we fighting about it? Why are we debating about what's in scripture and what isn't? What did Jesus say? What did he not say? Like it's it's so simple, this existence, and we're making it so complicated with so many
Totally.
divisions and so many different sects of heavy energy and all that. So
Yeah.
the gist of that was that you want to be grounded and rooted in the 3D, but not become of it. Like, don't get caught
Yes.
in it, and try through kindness, love, all that good stuff, raise your frequency to where when you get to the nebula and you get to your life review, you do have a choice on whether you want to come back or not. And if you want to have a life of crime and depravity and cheating, lying, and stealing and just not, give a crap, then yeah, you're coming back. And like I've had other mediums on the show tell me that similar thing, but it was like I experienced it and embodied it for the very first time. And man, I feel like there's one more aspect about this that I'm forgetting. But no, it was just like it's all about your frequency and how you can raise it and not get dragged down by the
Yes.
lower densities. And it adds more fuel to the fire that our parasitic ruling class is either in touch with or maybe even possessed by non-human entities that want to take control of this whole thing, right?
Absolutely. And when Phil, I'm just going to say, subscribe to his show because in the very near future, I am on his show and I'm talking about that exact topic
Yeah,
where I had communication from the spirit world, where, and this was in my experience, November 2023. And the spirit world had given me visions and clairaudient downloads where that, in fact, is taking place. People are like,
yeah,
what?
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
there are lower vibrational entities. You can call them, label them, whatever you want. Don't bother me. But they are influencing the global elites, the the governing bodies. Let's look at the WEF, all of these people. They are
yeah.
influencing, I'll just say, people in power.
Oh yeah,
And this
yeah.
is where we have to be so mindful, not just as humans, but as spiritual beings having that human experience. We have to be so mindful of our free will.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Because what you're talking about, Phil, your experience going into the nebula very much aligns with my understanding up until this point. Could change in a year, I don't know, but it very much aligns up into the point of where we have that spectrum of energy, and based on our lived experiences in the physical and the 3D, that really determines where we end up in the spirit world. You call it the destination of
Yeah,
souls, right?
yeah.
So that makes perfect sense to me. That, I mean, the whole point of us having this human experience, I believe, is so we can have those lessons and experience for our soul grow. So it's kind of like, you're in high school, you fail the class, they make you repeat it,
Hmm.
right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know we're just about up against it for time here, but I have to get this out. This is the last point of
Yeah.
the journey, and it ties in all the suspense about what are the orbs and where do they really come from, because I got shown in this. Now, what's interesting about this is it's come up with me in a couple of other different journeys from other guides. And I just want to say about this whole thing before I continue is that I don't swear this to be the ultimate truth, but what I have shared is a shared truth with many, many people who have gone to explore it. So I think there's something to it. That's all I can say. So there's a theory out there. This is just about ETs for a second and UFOs. Is that why a lot of UFO UAP sightings are so fleeting? Is that they're entering our atmosphere not necessarily from space, but from an alternate dimension, and this dimension is so thick, like I've just been saying, is that they can only stay in our atmosphere for so long before they have to disappear, and that either has to do with the ship or the beings themselves. And I've had some experiencers on the show who are like, oh, their ship is a living organism, it's like a horse, like similar. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty mind-blowing and that's very interesting. I think it's the same with the orbs. They're only here for so long because, and you know how when you looked at the close up in my editing software, how it looked like it was kind of incomplete. Like
Hmm.
I think that's the maximum amount it could show itself in our atmosphere and our density. Okay, and because we live in such a high density, these things can only last so long. And I've been shown that these orbs are the manifestation of past loved ones who are trying to like show us the way. And
Okay.
they pass through the nebula into our atmosphere when we open our hearts and we show gratitude, unconditional love, the highest
Mm.
spectrum of the Hawkins like map of consciousness. Okay. And I have no idea if that's right or not, but it really resonates with me. And I think there's something to it. And I'm not 100% sure how it links to ET phenomenon, but I think that might be revealed and it could be part of what gets revealed in 2026 if everything comes to pass like it's been said. So Courtney, you and the listeners who aren't familiar with this whole story, you got your homework to do after this one.
Absolutely. I'm going to say something here, chime in about
Hmm.
what you're talking about, where the hypothesis is, or the theory is that these are souls coming to communicate, and to be able to connect with them on a frequency, it needs to be of that loving frequency
Yes.
and gratitude. And you know what? That's the exact energy that mediums have to be in. That's that
Yeah.
exact frequency in order for soul to soul communication to
Yeah.
happen.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is like it's kind of starting to like the little bells are going off. I go, there's definitely similarities there. So that makes sense, right? I mean, if we look at people in I mean, there's all different spiritual modalities. We look at mediumship, we look at energy healing, we look at witchcraft, we look at people who are in hoodoo, voodoo, all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying any opinions on any of it, but depending on what they're doing in those modalities, there is intention, and that intention has a frequency, and that's
Yeah.
what powers the work, the rituals, the ceremony.
Yes.
So, yeah, I totally resonate with what you're saying here. This is incredibly fascinating, and I don't want to get side railed, but or sidetracked, but what we're seeing in the scientific community, especially when it comes to documenting using electronic devices, spirit phenomena and spirit manifestation is increasing. There is an incredible lady out of Brazil, Sonia
Mhm.
Rinaldi, and she does a bunch of
Oh
stuff.
yeah. Yep.
And you can check her out on YouTube. And then there's the AREI, I believe it's the Afterlife Research Education Institute, something like that. I think we've talked about that before too. But there's a bunch of stuff going on where this stuff that intuitives, mediums, and healers have always known, now there's science backing this stuff up. And then we look at the footage that you have about that orb, it very much matches characteristics. I'm talking about shape, color, and movement that mediums and intuitives have been describing in all kinds of text for thousands of years.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So I think I love that stuff. I love the science behind the spiritual, which I think
Hmm.
is fascinating. So 2024, incredibly powerful for you.
Yeah. It was a challenging year in a lot of ways, but it was also very profound at the same time. So,
And where's 2025 headed for you this year?
well, it's interesting. 2025, as we know in numerology, it's a 9 year, so it's about completions and wrapping things up.
Hmm.
Certain things in my life this spring have gotten turned upside down, but in the best way possible. And I think I'm really being nudged towards my true purpose, and I'm still trying to figure out what that is. So I think a lot of 2025 is about cleanup, resetting, reorganizing. And actually, it's interesting. So I won't go too far into this, but a couple of nights ago, I was at a shamanic breathwork event. It would just be my fifth one in just over a year. And I got shown some very interesting insights about where I'm at on my soul's journey. So I feel like I'm at the end of clearing out the past and the completions and going into something very new. And I got shown this visual that 2026 for me would be like I was living in fast forward. So I'm really curious to see what that's going to be. The podcast is going to continue. I'm going to keep doing my work, but I'm also fiercely, intensely focusing inward and on like the root chakra stuff so I could propel to when things really go into overdrive, I guess.
I love it. I'm so excited for you because we've met, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I think
About
five
that.
years ago.
Yeah.
And to see the growth and the evolvement, not just in the podcast, but like in your soul calling,
Yeah.
your soul work is incredible. And I think you're in the right place. Like your heart's in the right place. And the spirit world, your guides are there with you. I think that's amazing. And, I mean, your work is different than mine, but then there's so many
Yeah.
similarities. And I think awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's a big responsibility, but you know what? You came here for it. So that's incredible.
Sure. Do I have a quick second to
Yeah,
plug
absolutely.
plug the upcoming lineup of the show? So cuz just
Yeah,
because I have it's very rare. I'm like a few shows ahead and I have really neat stuff coming up. So one of them, don't know when I'm going to air it yet. It might be early June is with Courtney. She
yeah.
made her solo return to the show. Very lengthy chat and I've added on a pretty lengthy outro tying on to some of the things we
Okay.
got into today as well. Um I have Dee Dee Jabril returning to the podcast. She came on a couple of years back as one half of Paranormally Blonde. That's kind of fizzled out for the time being, but Dee Dee has become, she shifted from paranormal investigation to becoming a dream interpreter. So we're going to get into that. And I'm going to reveal a dream I had last December about the Bledsoe clan that I've also taken journeys into, which I think is going to provide a lot of clarity and interesting stuff from there. Like I said, I have an individual from Southern California who's right at the forefront of this phenomenon and has met and got to know the Bledsoe family. So hearing his perspective is going to be amazing. And I have a woman coming on who's local to me, making her very first appearance on the show. She has a crystal skull shop on her farm. And I went out there last month with a couple of friends and did a crystal skull meditation for the very first time. And she has a very neat story. And all that is coming up in the next few weeks on Unexplained Inc. So I'm glad I was able to get that in there. And I hope people tuning in are looking forward to it or are curious about it.
All of that contact information for Phil, his show, the website is in the show notes, guys. So check it out. Phil, it's been so awesome having you on the show. I can say that I could not have anticipated what we were going to talk about
Yeah, I
today.
didn't think so.
No, I mean, I was revved up with caffeine and
Yeah.
expectation, and that just like hit the mark. And I think it's important to have these conversations because people think about spirituality and they go, well, just the afterlife. Oh, no, honey, there's spiritual realms that are existing in real time, like right
Yeah.
now, and they're interacting with our physical environment. And if we are here doing the work and connecting with these different realms, we need to know what it's about and what's going on and keeping current on that because things are changing super rapidly,
Oh,
like
yeah.
big time, where it's at times a bit overwhelming, but then we can have people like you that come on the show, they break it down, and it makes it easier to digest what's actually taking place.
Yeah. And one thing I really appreciate is that you were able to bring more context into some of the things I brought up, even in the moment. So I think that just added more substance to it as well.
Yeah, it's awesome convo. Thanks so much for being on the show, Phil. We're going to have you back because I know there's a bunch of other stuff
Okay.
that I want to talk to you about.
Yeah, there certainly is. And thank you for having me again. And at this moment in time, because of where we're at the recording, I want to wish you a happy Mother's Day as well.
Thank
Um,
you.
I'm very shortly going to be on my way to a mom's dinner myself. So I just wanted to get
Awesome.
that in there before we wrap.
Thank you, Phil. The Connected Spirit isn't just a podcast, it's a remembering of who we are, a remembering of our connection to spirit, and a remembering that we are never walking this path alone. Mediumship isn't just about speaking with spirits, it's about deepening the connection to our own spirit, to one another, and to the energy that moves through everything. So as you leave this space, ask yourself, what part of this conversation stirred something within you? What connection is spirit inviting you to strengthen? If this episode spoke to you, please share it, leave a review, and connect with me on Instagram at Medium Courtney Dawson or visit my website at mediumcourtneydawson.com. Your presence in this community matters because connection isn't just about what we seek, it's what we are. Until next time, trust your spirit, trust the unseen world, and trust that you are always, always connected.